Welcome to Redefining the Good Businessman. My name is Sarah Andordel, and I'm the founder of the Conscious Business Chamber of Commerce. This chamber intends to lead the conversation about how men and women together can create a better world of work, one in which men honor, respect, and protect their female colleagues, and where women feel safe, valued as equals, and inspired to support their male colleagues from a place of mutual understanding and appreciation. In the age of Trump and sex scandal crisis, it is clear that heart-centered leaders from all walks of life need to come together and talk about what really is going on here and what we can do about it. This conversation will be real, sometimes raw, but will be led by a commitment from all involved to speak with transparency, listen with an open heart, find common ground, and create sustainable and actionable solutions. Join me with the Conscious Business Chamber of Commerce as I interview men who are helping to redefine what it means to be a good businessman. So welcome everyone to Redefining the Good Businessman. And today I am here with the fabulous Chess Edwards. Hello, Chess.
Hi, Sarah Ann. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm really excited to talk to you today. So let's just jump into it. As a way of introducing yourself to our audience, can you tell us how you got here? Why do you do what you do in your work? What are you up to?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on and for doing all the good work that you do and for providing this podcast.
You're welcome.
I'm sitting here in Sedona. This is my home now. I'm looking out at that Thunder Mountain. I live at the base of Thunder Mountain. I have a retreat center here. And as I'm looking out, what I recognize and what is so beautiful about this is that everything I'm looking at is so pure. It's pure wilderness. I'm right up against the edge of the wilderness. And it just is what it is, you know, no pretense, no posturing, no image that it's trying to portray. It's just being what it is. And I think I appreciate that so much because that's really the nature of my work. In response to how did I get here, after a lifetime of a lot of struggle with trying to figure out the classic question, right? Who am I? Which is really asking, you know, from the egoic perspective, how do I fit? And after a lifetime of trying to create an image of self, both for myself in my own mind and for others, and recognizing that that was never true. It was never authentic. It was always something I was trying to create to make sure I was safe and loved and that I belonged. And after a lifetime of doing that, I was fortunate enough to find spiritual teachers that helped guide what was a natural inclination within myself for truth, to ask, if I'm not this image of self that I've created in my mind, this construct, this narrative of self that I've been referencing as myself for my whole life, when I really got it, it's like, wow, that's crazy. to define myself as this construct that I've created and say, well, that's me. So my work is to help people see beyond that construct that they've created and actually surrender to, awaken to, align with, and embrace and embody a more eternal, unchanging, solid, whole, divine nature of being, who they really are, and how to live from that while wandering about in a world of illusion.
Well, you're the perfect person to talk to on this topic, right? Redefining the good businessman. I mean, I feel like we're moving through this incredibly intense time of redefining everything that we knew to be true.
Yes.
And here you've really taken that on in your own spiritual path, and now you're helping others. That's perfect.
Yeah, it really does feel like an edge that is expanding rapidly, and more people are showing up at that edge of recognizing, wait a minute, things are changing, and I'm going to move from what I've, quote, always known into a sense of what's calling me, what's a more resonant calling that is calling from within. So yeah, I agree. It's expanding really rapidly, and the time is now that it's more available to everybody, not just because there's more people sharing this, but because inherently the energy within which we all exist, that we're all sharing, it's just vibrating at this whole different level of truth now.
Yeah. I mean, you could say many people are being led to that edge and others are being pushed.
Yeah.
It's just the reality of the world right now with all of the, let's just look at the sex scandal crisis and what's happening with the presidency and politics and all that stuff. It's like, if people have not found the edge by now, they're probably going to be gently guided at first, otherwise pushed.
Well, one of the things I appreciate about so much of the dialogue that's up, and to be frank, quite, you hear people speak about a real sense of being disheartened by how much of the bullshit is alive and really flowing and flying right now, um, is because whenever something that doesn't want to change is being the light's being shed on it, the resistance becomes all that much more strong. When this dialogue wasn't so alive, wasn't so ripe, and so exposed, the dysfunctional, disempowered ways of being, the false power was able to hide. It wasn't
Right.
being threatened. It's now being threatened by truth. It's now being said, no, this, we're calling it out. And so, boy, there's a lot of resistance and a lot of anger and a lot of kind of emotional violence out there in the world right now.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a second, because I'll never forget the night that Trump was elected. And I remember who I was with and where I was. I saw it coming from a mile away. And it's almost like I saw the years unfolding in front of me. And I actually had no problem with him being elected. I was kind of relieved. I was like, finally, we can face what's really going on, because he's just going to make it really obvious. And yet I look around and I see all these people that are so upset every day. They're on Twitter talking about what an asshole he is. And this is not going to solve anything. I mean, this has always been going on.
Yeah.
What do you think about all of that? How can we really resolve what's happening in a way that's actually productive rather than divisive? Or does this just have to go down the way that it is from the perspective of somebody like you, a man? This is why I talk to men,
Mm.
because I don't understand the mind of the man.
Hey, the mind of
I don't think I ever will.
whether it's man or woman, from my perspective, the mind of anybody who's identified with the mind as who they are is, that's what's hard to understand, no matter what gender it is. But
Mm,
I agree completely in that, God bless Trump. We need him. If I liken it to our own journey, that when one's paying attention and one is truly devoted to and interested in truth, then the very first thing you have to encounter, if you're really interested in truth, are all the untruths. So
yeah.
it's the first thing we need to encounter whenever we say, I want to be more loving. Well, all right. It's like the universe says, do you really want to learn how to be more loving? Yes, I do. Okay. The first thing you're going to have to encounter are all the ways you're not loving. So,
Yes.
as a global or universal consciousness is awakening to itself, it's the same thing. If we're asking for truth, if we're asking for a more honest, divine, authentic, compassionate engagement with each other, we have to face all the ways that we're not. So, it's got to come up. And it happens in our own personal experience too, right? We don't,
Mm,
if we learn, we don't hold the shadow aspects of ourself that arise at arm's length and say, no, 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 no.
yep.
Don't want to look at that. Well, we don't grow. So we look at it within ourselves. Let's look at it within our communities as well.
You just explained the last few years of my life in a way that has never been so clearly, succinctly spoken to me before.
Mm,
All of these things that I knew to be true. And I think you brought this up when we first reconnected a couple of months ago, when I was telling you about some of the drama in my life over the last couple of years, you were like, well, what were the questions that you asked
Yeah.
regarding what do you desire in your life? And now it just makes so much sense. And I knew it to be true, where if we're on the path and we say no more to something, or we say yes to something, we have to experience almost the opposite in order to get really clear.
Yeah, the beautiful Rumi poem that says, your task is not to seek for love. Your task is to seek for and recognize all the barriers within you that you've built against it.
I love Rumi.
Yeah, yeah.
What a man, huh?
What a man, a man who was willing to be and feel and totally abide in love.
Yeah.
And then to see what words and what truths came out of that. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, Chess, I mean, that's, first of all, for me to hear that so clearly, that's such a great teaching, because I know that anybody who's on, a path of awakening, they're going to experience some very, very dark days. And when you can hear it like that, to understand that it's a process of really awakening to one's greatest desires through oftentimes contrast, there's a lot of comfort in that, knowing that maybe just the absolute fucking insanity that you go through is all for a greater purpose, not because you're being punished, but because you're being enlightened.
Yeah, and I think it brings, I mean, maybe this is jumping right into the nature of the idea of conscious community, and how we can meet each other in this place. Isn't really one of the core reasons that we want to hold our failings, our inadequacies, our shadow, the places where we're not integrated yet, the things we're working through, that we want to hide from those because of our sense of shame around them, in that, and especially for men,
Yeah.
that we don't want this to be seen. So boy, I mean, one of the things that at least from my perspective and my life, and working with a lot of men do not like to be inadequate at things, right? We really, really don't want to be inadequate at our work. We don't want to be inadequate in sex. We don't want to be inadequate as a leader. So the natural inclination is to say, oh God, here's this part of me that is such bullshit, that is still ruling me, that really is not a valuable, or it's a disempowering part of myself, to define that sharing as an absolute strength. That a man could have the strength to show up and say, here's where I'm confused. Here's where I'm still controlled by my ego. Here is where I am struggling with this whole human thing. That's strength. All the advertising says, you've got to show up top notch in your full game. Otherwise, A, you're not going to be accepted, and B, you're probably going to fail. And then you will be both kicked out of the tribe and a failure.
Yeah. Well, that whole idea of having to live up to this, especially in the conscious community, this like perfect person ideal, I think it's just absolutely killing us. And I long for a reality where we can just be really honest about who we are, and not continue in this vicious cycle where men are feeling ashamed because of inadequacy, which I completely understand. I've always said I would never want to be a man because there's just too much pressure. But I long for a man who will take a bullet for me, who will, protect me, who will never make me feel like garbage because he feels like garbage. And that's the cycle that we're in right now. And it's almost like there's no structure in place, even in conscious community. And I would argue, especially in conscious community, for there to be some real resolution, for there to be some real forgiving of one another for what we've done. I think it's not too late. I think it's not too late to undo a lot of the hurt that we've caused each other. But I just don't know if people are ready to get real.
Well, we certainly have to stop shaming each other. So that's got to be a first step, that we're willing to hold that space for each other. It's valuable, I think, for men to do that with each other, to come together with other men and have an opportunity to be seen and to be honest and to be met and to be called out for where they hide. And that's not easy. It's and it's so beautiful when it happens well.
Well, that's the key. Can you tell us about how that goes down when it's done well? In my mind, I'm, thinking about when Donald Trump was busted on audio
Right.
talking about grabbing that woman.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if he actually provided a public apology for that and how that would look? Like, can you imagine if there was actually an intervention with Trump
Yeah. No.
where all these powerful men were like, dude, not okay.
Well, that's kind of
This is how you're hiding. And imagine if he listened, and
right.
then imagine if he apologized, and imagine if the woman accepted his apology. Like, how could that, is that even possible?
It's not yet, apparently. Those who are really interested in honesty and integrity and an evolution said, no, this is not all right. This has to be called out for what it is, which is unacceptable. And the portion of the population that seemed to be, at least from my perspective, primarily interested in a false power, in maintaining and claiming a false power, and were able to be disingenuous and say, this is just, locker room talk. And I really appreciated the men, especially sports figures who spend time in locker rooms, to step forward and say, let's be very clear. This is not locker room talk. It happens, but it's called out. In our locker room as a team, we don't put up with this. So that has to be done, I think, throughout our communities, and not in a you're banished kind of way, but in an honest way that says, if you continue this behavior, that is not acceptable within this community, and you will be asked not to participate in this community. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really the dream from my perspective.
Yeah. And it's an honesty. It's saying, look, we love you and we're here for you, but we're letting you know that if you keep showing up in this way, it is not healthy, and it is not accepted,
Yeah.
and it's not okay. Yeah.
It'd be amazing. We have a long ways to go, it seems, or maybe not. I think what also comes up for me is I don't think, and one of the reasons I started this podcast is I don't think that people are really talking about the process of how we can get there, the logistics. I talk about I'm always a process girl. I like to solve problems. And it seems like to me, let's talk about the football players, for example. They said, no, that's not locker room talk, whether or not they were being honest. I'm sure that there was,
I think they were being very genuine and saying, yes, it happens at times, but it's not put up with.
And it's unacceptable, and we don't accept it.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to be part of this team, if you want to, grow and evolve and be at your best, what we're calling out is that is not being at your best. That is not well representative of the excellence of humanity that we're all looking to achieve. And
so I would consider this to be men really putting a stake in the ground and being like, this is a guiding principle for us. This is a code of conduct, or this is an unacceptable way of conducting oneself. If you use this word or you talk about a woman a certain way in the locker room, we say no. And then, that's the interesting part. And then what happens? What happens if a man says something inappropriate? Because oftentimes they're just, banished or shamed or hated,
Right.
kicked
Right.
out. And we don't
Right.
want to do that.
Well, I think it's the honest dialogue of. So I'm thinking of if I pare it down to many of the men's groups that I participate in, and had a beautiful men's group when I lived in San Diego for about 10 years. We met every month. In that dialogue, we would really just stop and 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 ask honestly and authentically, like, "Hey, brother, really, hold on, stop, slow down. Is that true? Is that really how you feel? Is that coming from your highest nature? Is that coming from your most divine knowing of self? Or is that perhaps something that churned out of your conditioning and maybe came from a place of fear and a sense of disconnection with your divine essence, and therefore you're reverting to a more primal conditioned state of being?" So that's what we would do. We would really we wouldn't immediately shame or shun or banish. It would be the opportunity to stop and ask somebody, hold on, let's ask you some questions so you can look for yourself and see whether or not this is really the man that you want to be.
Mm.
And so for other men to call each other out and say, "Hey man, I know you to be somebody of integrity who wants to be at their best, and I'm letting you know," and asking you yourself, do you believe this is really the best you have to offer?
Mhm.
Hmm.
Wow, that's beautiful. As a woman, and just knowing what I've experienced over the years, I have such a longing to be in part of a true community, part of a support network, a support group, if you will, where I can show up the way that I am, know that people will hold me accountable, but won't abandon me.
Hmm.
And how, you know, lovely. And maybe you can speak to this, that you created that space, or you were part of that space where, men could be honest about what was going on. They would be held accountable and called out, but not abandoned for that behavior then, because that's why people hide. That's why people don't show up in their truth. That's why they lie
Yeah.
to themselves and to others, because they know that if it's revealed what they've done,
Hmm.
they're either going to be, abandoned.
Well, they have to have those examples. I mean, I remember for a long time, Sarah Ann, in my own personal development, kind of before my spiritual development or self-realization really started to take shape, the days where I was just trying to figure out, why I felt so, alone or afraid in the world, um, that I was told again and again by people, you can be honest, you can be vulnerable, you can let us know where you have in the past or you are currently feeling inadequate, and we're actually going to love you all the more because now we feel like we can trust you. Now we feel like, oh, there's a genuine relationship forming here because now we can trust you. If you're always just showing your best side, actually we don't trust that, and it doesn't fit. So I was told that again and again, but Sarah Ann, it took years for that programming within me, that trust, to really take shape, because it was shown to me again and again. I would meet with these groups and we would do some intense personal development and exploration work over a period of days. And it was so wild to finally get to a place of absolute confession and honest, vulnerable expression and be like holding my breath
Hmm.
and to look around and go, wow, nobody's recoiling. Nobody's making that face of like, whoa, dude, I mean, we didn't mean like really be honest. And there was just nothing, but in fact, there was a sense of leaning in. There was a sense of people saying, there, thank you, that's it. Now we're having a real conversation about our lives. So it's kind of like meditation, right? I mean, for me to really, really, really recognize, to awaken into a true self-realization, didn't happen with the one meditation, didn't happen with a month of meditation. It took a lot of commitment and discipline and devotion. So I appreciate what you're doing, because this is about creating communities that are devoted, disciplined, practiced, willing to stay in it, and willing to lose the path and come back to it. It needs good leadership and good guidance to help people stay with what is difficult.
Yeah.
So within communities as well, it requires devotion. It requires a true intention of what are we really here for, and not to be afraid to speak it, to be able to say, okay, are we truly here to help each other, our communities, and our businesses operate from their highest, most divine, most authentic nature, our most powerful, true, eternal nature of being, and to call it that. That requires a leadership as well, for somebody to hold the space. We go to teachers for our personal development, so let's have a leader who holds space for our community development and our business development as well.
Yeah, that word devotion
Yeah.
has become so sacred to me. How can we be devoted in our relationships? Most importantly, Chess, when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
That's where I think the tragedy really lies and where it rises, because we all talk about being devoted and committed to, the highest path. And yet when things go south or when there's conflict, we lose sight of devotion. When you were talking about your practice of developing trust in these men's groups, what came up for me is my experience with people telling me that I should trust them, and me being very vulnerable about being burned in the past by, let's talk about men, saying that I could trust them. And then, fuck me, they do it again. They betray me. So it's like circling back to the beginning of our discussion. What's obvious to me is I needed that trust to be broken over and over, and so that I could finally say no more, and really know that to be the way of life that I was stepping into. But that's what comes up for me. How can we create communities of support that are actually committed, devoted, and won't let us down?
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of be a purist here.
Okay.
I don't know any other way to be honest and in full integrity in life except for to abide in my divine nature, to recognize the truth of being beyond my idea of self, conditioned self, construct, mind construct of self. This is called the illusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
The dream of self, the story we tell about ourselves. Most people are trying really, really hard, and beautifully so, to be better people, to be good people, to make good choices, to do the right thing. That all comes quite naturally. There is no efforting. There's no trying when one is truly devoted to the truth of their being. So from this purist stance, I might say that, I might get in trouble for this, but we'll
That's what this podcast is for.
See if it, but can a conscious community truly be created if the people in that community are not truly conscious? So if a man or a woman or anyone says, you can trust me, there's a difference between you can trust me to try to be the best person I can be. Okay, that's good. I'm glad you're paying attention to those things. I'm glad you're efforting in that regard. I'm glad that that's your intention. Beautiful. But that's very different than you can trust me. I would love to see, I think we're a ways off from this. I would love to see conscious business communities where the people are actually abiding in and they know their absolute divine nature. But that's a pretty big stretch.
Well, and it's good to talk about because we have to start somewhere. We're reaching for sure. We're reaching.
So in your personal life, do you not find that you are drawn to surrounding yourself with people who are, I know for myself, I surround myself with people who are devoted to truth, to their divine truth.
Yeah, in my personal life now, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think I had to just go through some things and understand that I always know if somebody is being honorable. I don't
Mm-hmm.
always have to anticipate or expect the best from somebody. You just know if somebody is honoring you. At least I do from my belly. And I don't attract those experiences anymore. This is something very new for me. I love the people in my life right now. I absolutely cherish the people in my life right now.
You can tell the difference, can't you, between somebody who walks into a room who is trying to be a good person and somebody
Yeah.
who walks into the room and they're just in their presence. There's no efforting whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
They look at you differently. They have a feeling of trust around them because you recognize that they're not walking in with a persona that they've crafted to be a good persona. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You described
Yeah.
perfectly the people of my past and the people who I surround myself with now. And of course, I think that I've come a long way.
Yes.
So that makes all the difference. And I had to learn, I think, by experiencing the betrayal of others. But I've not lived perfectly. I've hurt a lot of people. But I have to say, I've always been that person that you could share your deepest, darkest secret with.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't judge you.
I like what you said around, if I really am honest about what it was for a long time, I was doing my best, totally self-serving. I was just doing my best so that I could be accepted. But so much of it was just around, I was looking out for just trying to make sure my ego identity was defended and held up. Something you said earlier about how men get together. Oftentimes, what we're doing is we are defining ourselves within our communities through our successes, right? My
Yeah.
business is going really well. I've figured a lot of stuff out. I've got a handle on this. I'm in control. I have a lot of influence and I'm making a difference. That's big. I'm making a difference. But boy, we really got to check ourselves if making a difference is part of what makes us awesome. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm making a
Yeah.
difference and I want you to see me for that. I want you to recognize that. I want you to pat me on the back and I want to get the accolades for making a difference. When we can really move into that selfless place where we don't need the validation at all because we're actually connected to our true nature of being. And that's good. Like, I don't need any validation now. Then, what if we were, really holding space for each other and expressing how our businesses are benefiting humanity, how our businesses are benefiting the environment, are benefiting expanding consciousness, benefiting the highest nature of all people and all beings. And not because, see how cool I am that I'm doing all this great business, but just because it just feels so good and so right. And to have that feeling of it, and if nobody ever noticed this, that would be okay.
I think about this actually a lot.
It's ideal if we don't compete. But if we're going to compete, let's compete around who's kicking ass the most and making the biggest difference in the world.
Well, right.
But it's ideal that we just don't have to compete at all. There's no competition. There's just, I do what I do because it feels so alive and good and loving.
Well, that's the healthy competition, right? I've stepped away a lot. Here I am running a chamber of commerce, but I've stepped
Hmm.
away from the business community because I've just been sickened by just all of the enthusiasm for what doesn't matter. Like this, the celebrity coaching phenomena and all of the money and, you know, getting paid a lot for your services and building, bigger lists, bigger lead magnets, bigger funnels, all of that stuff. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
none of this matters. Why can't we be in healthy competition, if you will, or getting together about how we can use our business acumen to solve really big problems?
Hmm.
That's the longing that I have, to really be engaged in being selfless and not being driven by that desire to be a conscious celebrity.
Yeah. So here, this is interesting. One of the questions I would invite, how would I move differently, show up differently, act differently, engage differently if I had absolutely no need whatsoever to be recognized or seen or validated? I can tell you that for men, we would stop trying to conquer so much. We would stop trying to acquire so much. We would stop trying to dominate so much. We would stop trying to conquer women so much, because that's
Mhm.
all a inflation of the image of self that we're projecting out there. And we're projecting the image of self because we're not actually abiding in and connected to the true divine nature of self. If we are already home in our own hearts, if we are already whole, if we are already absolutely connected to the one divine consciousness as self, we would absolutely stop all of the need to project an image of self to be validated and loved and accepted.
Yeah.
So there's an author named Stephen Pressfield, and he wrote a beautiful book called the War of Art, not the Art of War, the War of Art. And he talks about, if you're really to be in
Huh.
your true creative space, how difficult that can be. And it's about our feelings of lack, and it's about our feelings of needing to prove ourselves and needing to be seen and needing to get it right and needing not to be inadequate and all of these things. And he says in there, relating to business, if one morning, everybody was just suddenly woke up and all these benighted souls woke up in their true essence of being, knowing who they absolutely are with no need to prove, how many business industries would absolutely collapse overnight? You know, all the industries around, alcohol, tobacco, you got to look good, makeup, clothing, the right car, all of, dandruff shampoos, like all of these industries would absolutely collapse that are completely in place to prop up the image of self.
Well, and I think your inner oracle just came out, because I believe the knights are waking up. So we could see a lot of business collapsing over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Looking at how can we be in a space where we're not trying to bolster that image of self. I've been thinking about this a lot because I look at some of the, conflicts and heartache that have come up over the last couple of years. And oftentimes it's been with people who are in the purposeful business community or the conscious business community. The conflicts have come up because of jealousy in business. And
Mm-hmm.
isn't that interesting? Like, what? Aren't we supposed to be solving problems? Aren't we supposed to be raising people up? And yet we are being ineffective and inefficient in our missions because of stupid, childish jealousy?
Yeah. Well, it comes up. I mean, I watch it come up in myself when, here I am in Sedona, and I teach self-realization, and a guy moves to town. He's a very well-known teacher, and he's got these huge audiences showing up to his, weekly meetings. And there was a part of me going, I don't like this. he's getting more attention. He's getting more validation. He's getting more accolades than I am. And it was so cool to watch it and watch it come up and recognize it for what it is. And then the way out of that was in my practices of remembering. How is it that this happens within purposeful or quote conscious communities? I again would come back to the question of, is it truly a conscious community? Are the members of the community truly conscious, or are they simply purposeful and trying to be conscious people?
It's a good question, and I'm not going to answer that.
It's a big ask. I know that. It's a big ask.
I believe I know the answer. I don't have to ask myself. I don't, engage in that kind of silly competition because I do really want to engage in conscious collaboration. I teach that in my work. Like when you really know your value, there is no competition. We can all enhance the offerings of one another. And it's silly to get caught up in all of that, especially when you care about people, when you care about friends. Why ruin relationships over conscious business dealings? It's crazy that can even happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is. And again, from my purist perspective, the reason it happens is because people are coming at it from the personality. They're coming at it from the constructed person, from the person that they've developed that has a sense of, well, I know my worth, but it's still a constructed worth.
Tell me, Chess, about being a man and experiencing other men and how they can really put on a good conscious man act when they're in a safe space of sharing and then going out into the real world and just leaving that conscious personality behind. Because this has come up for me in my life where in a certain setting, a man will be a certain way, and a woman, of course. But then you get them alone or you get them in a bad situation and all of that goes away. It's like they're an imposter. This is a real problem.
Yeah. It's a constructed personality arising within pure consciousness. So that's how it happens, is people can speak a good game and speak to their ideals and speak to their intentions and speak to who they're trying to be. But most people aren't taking that extra step of saying, well, who am I really?
Have you experienced that with men where they act a certain way in a safe space and then out in the real world, they're totally different?
Oh yeah, a lot. So I love the idea of small intimate groups.
Yeah.
That have a clear intention. I watch men take, as it did for me, months or years to break down their image and get real. And the revelation that is often felt is, oh my God, how much easier this is. I can stop posturing. I can stop, efforting. I can stop trying to be such a man. And it just comes so naturally. A big thing that happens in men's groups, I don't know if there's a bit of an aside, but it's fascinating, is you'll watch in a circle go around. And if one man is really in the honest and authentic and vulnerable space of saying, all right, I need to let you guys know, I'm feeling really unstable right now. I feel like I'm in a breakup and I just feel like hurting this other person emotionally. I don't like who I'm being. I'm scared. I think I'm worthless. I feel like a fraud, all the things that can come up, right? And it's so wild to watch some of the other guys in the group want to immediately fix that and say, no, look at all the good things you do. Don't go there. And I recognize that the reason they're doing that is because they're like, hey, if we stay in this real vulnerable, honest space and just listen and hold space for each other and say, yeah, I know, I hear you. I hear what you're talking about. Where do you think that's coming from? What's your history? The guy who's trying to fix it is the guy who's saying, I do not want this to come around to me, and I have to be that vulnerable too.
Right.
And here's the most powerful thing. We learned this in our group. One guy was expressing, and we all kept trying to tell him what he should do. Well, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that. And one of our guys in our group said, hey, you know what, guys? Maybe the best thing we could do is, instead of telling this guy what to do, maybe we could just speak from our own experience of where we also feel that same quality, that same challenge, and maybe how we've approached it in our own lives.
Yes.
Because now we're all being vulnerable, we're all being equal and sharing, hey, me too. Okay, so this is the Me Too movement for men.
I was just going to say that. No, that and you just nailed it, Chess. I'm waiting for the Me Too revolution for men. I'm waiting for men to stand up and be like, you know what that asshole did? I did it too.
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't done something horrible in some way, or at least had the thought? This is what I'm waiting for. And this is where I think the real healing will happen, where men actually stand up, especially these guys that are on Twitter, like tweeting about what a dick Donald Trump is. And I watch the men of my past who have done way worse things to me than Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Throwing their energetic stones at him, shaming him for the terrible things that he has done. They've done way worse. I'm waiting for the real knights to stand up and be like, you know what? Me too. As in me too. I did that. And I want to say, I'm sorry.
See, that's beautiful. As long as we feel that we are at a deficit and it can be filled by somebody else, by a conquest of some sort, there's going to be trouble. I remember about even a couple of months ago, a woman came for a session. We did a beautiful meditation session. She was from out of town, here in Sedona for a few days. We were going to have another session the next day, and there was an attraction. And I thought, oh, I'll just ask her out to dinner tonight. And we'll have another session tomorrow, and I'll get sexual or anything. I'll just ask her out to dinner. Who knows? I'm a single guy. She's a single, attractive woman. Maybe something will develop here. Now, she had told me in the session that one of her things was she just, she would look for her own validation in the next guy. And here I was thinking, well, I could be the next guy. So where luckily what was valuable was I had friends. I went to two of my buddies here in town, and I said, this is what's showing up. I want to ask this woman out. I know it's not appropriate, and I'm somehow in my mind, I'm justifying it. Talk to me about this. What's going on here? And within 5-10 minutes, we were all able to take a deep breath and go, okay, whew, thanks. All right, this is completely inappropriate. And, I've got to be in my integrity, not because I want to, quote, be a good guy, but because it actually does come from my highest consciousness. So we got to have those people in our lives. We have to have those agreements that we can go to our community and say, me too. This is showing up, and it's ugly, and it's not good, and I need some help around it.
Oh, that's so good. I really would love to create that reality within the conscious business community where we have, those groups of support where, we can go and talk about what's going on, between men and men, women and men, women and women, whatever, our kids, and just be really honest and know that we have a community that's going to allow us to rise up.
What if that was one of the stated intentions? I don't know any community really that has that consciously as a stated intention that says, let's say just amongst men, if it was, all right, guys, here's the deal. We're here for you. If you're out in the world and you're being ruled by something that you recognize is probably out of integrity, you got to come. You've got to talk to us. I mean, this is AA, right? I've never been AA, but from what I've
Yeah.
seen, this is it. You've got your sponsor, and they say, look, you even think about going down the wrong path, you pick up the phone and you call somebody. Men, women need to be able to tap into
Yeah.
a community and say, I am addicted to my success. I'm addicted to my image of self. I'm addicted to being validated. And when it's coming up and it's steering me in a wrong direction, I need to be able to talk to somebody and come to a meeting and say, hi, my name's Chess, and I'm addicted to validation.
I love it. And this is what I've been talking about to other people in the conscious business community. Would we be more successful with healing the relationships between people, especially men and women, if we created guiding principles, steps, traditions, the 12 traditions, the 12 guiding principles, the codes of conduct that we say we are going to be devoted to? And over and over, I hear, yeah, we need that. But I also hear, especially in the conscious community, oh, who's going to police that? And I'm like, well, you know what? We are not going to police it. We're going to hold each other to the standards, and we're going to resolve
the community
conflict in a heart-centered way. There's such an avoidance mentality within some of the conscious community members that honestly, it drives me crazy.
Well, I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's how it's done. I mean, calling somebody out and saying, hey, you're being called on your bullshit is one thing. It's another thing to say, hey, there's something we need to talk about. We want to ask you, is this really who you want to be? We want to give you the opportunity to search within your own heart and look at whether or not this is, you, the true you, or whether or not this is a part of you that's driven by an addiction to validation or conquest or success. If it's held in that way, I think it can be a really powerful opportunity. I think codes of conduct are good. I call them rules of engagement. If those rules of engagement aren't there, everybody comes to work or into the community and they're all saying, I don't understand why that other person isn't playing by the rules. I'm playing by the rules. Right. And the truth is, no, you guys have never established the rules in the first place. Let's bring people together and actually have a dialogue around how do you create conscious community, which is, I know, your big question. And I think it is very possible. And actually, when the parameters are in place, the freedom between those parameters is all that much more alive because there's no more questioning. That's a big part of it. There's no more, ooh, I wonder if I'm crossing a line. I wonder if I'm not. I kind of am, but maybe no one will know it. But with the clear parameters that a community has come together and said, look, here's how we operate. And we're going to keep talking about this. And here's how we meet each other. Here is how we hold each other accountable. That there's some rules of engagement around that. When those are in place, boy, all sorts of creativity and ripeness can happen. But if people are questioning, oh, I don't know, I think I'm being in integrity. Have clear understanding of what is acceptable, what is not, what is rewarded as well. What is rewarded within this community? Oh, yeah, so-and-so had these incredible successes, but they destroyed about 5 people in the process. Right. Well, that's not rewarded. There's this other person, they haven't had quite as many successes, but man, they are the most supportive person in this community. We reward that. These things are important.
I like everything that you're saying, Chess. And I don't think rewarding means putting people up on pedestals. I'm very excited about this conversation because I think it would be really amazing to create these rules of engagement and to create these spaces in the business community where everybody feels safe. As a way of tying this discussion together, how do you think women can really support men during this time where we are really redefining what it means to be a good businessman?
Understanding
Mhm.
our pain, understanding our wounding, understanding that, well, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I don't know if this is true, but it feels to me like men typically feel more emptiness than women, because women have a natural connection to the rhythms of earth and moon and sky and stars and life. There's a natural a connection with earth and with the embodiment of the divine.
Yeah.
I think men feel a bit cast out. Men feel a bit adrift and alone. They don't have this natural connection. And therefore, we're scrambling to create meaning in life. And so if women could understand that pain and that emptiness that I think a lot of men operate from, that could be valuable.
That feels right to me too. I sense that in men. I sense that men really want to be held right now, just as much as women do. But I think women really want to be protected. And I think men really need to be held.
So I'll share one more quick story that I heard from Brene Brown. I think it really speaks to this. In Brene Brown's early work, speaking on shame, she was speaking primarily to women. And so from the stage, she was talking about how women can own their truth without feeling shame. So after the talk, she was signing books, and a woman and her two daughters and a man were in line, and they got their books signed. And the man said, "Hold on, I want to ask Brene a question." And his wife said, "No, come on, let's go, honey." And he said, "No, I want to check in with Brene about something." So he said to Brene, he said, "I notice you only speak about women's shame and not men's." And she said, "Well, I haven't done any research on men." He said, "Well, that's mighty convenient." And she was kind of caught in this moment. And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "See that woman over there and those two girls?" She said, "Yeah." He said, "The truth is, they would rather see me die, but stay on my white horse, my heroic white horse, than to fall off and fall apart." Women will say to a man, "I want you to be real. I want you to be honest. I want you to be vulnerable. I want you to really show me all of who you are." And oftentimes when the man really does, it scares the shit out of the woman. And she was like, "What are you doing? Get your ass back on that horse and pull your shit together."
Right.
And that's got to stop. To really be able to hold space for a man to say, "I am so lost and so confused and so hurt and so wounded, and I'm striking out against the world, and I create a lot of harm. And I want to stop, and I don't know how." For a woman to be able to hold space for, yes, okay, but do something about it. This is what it comes down to. I remember having a woman I was in a relationship with, really be clear about, "I'll hold space for you as long as you're actively working on moving through this. If you just want to wallow in this place, I'm not going to be here for you that long.
Right.
But if you want to move through it, I will walk through this with you, but you got to keep moving."
Well, that's the real heroism, right?
Yeah.
To do something about it. And this is where I think everybody will benefit, because what often happens is when there's pain caused in a relationship, I know that many people will flee the scene and there's no resolution. I believe real heroism comes in when you just rip somebody's heart out, but then you go back and you resolve it in the best way that you can.
Yeah.
That, I think, is what a real man does.
He stays present. I've got a blog, and one of my posts is called "Stay." And I wrote it at a time of a breakup where I was hurt. And I found myself wanting to, make sure that the person who hurt me also felt some hurt, right? And it was, nope, stay. That's an act of running. Stay present to that feeling and don't act on it, and stay present to where is that coming from. So yeah, I think what women could do most to hold space for men is to allow them to fall off their horse, let them completely fall apart, as long as they're willing to get help in pulling themselves back together.
That's so good. And of course, that's the best thing that we could do for men too.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a whole other side to this whole conversation. But
so what can men do for women?
I think exactly what you are expressing. Stay.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Stop being distracted by the next good thing.
Mm.
It's a cycle that's going to keep repeating. Just stay. I can't wait to read that blog post.
Yeah, it's pretty raw, but then of course I was pretty raw at the time. I'll send it to you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so tell us where our listeners can connect with you. I know you're in Sedona.
Mm-hmm.
I hope to see you soon. Sedona has been calling my name. I just love it there.
Yeah.
And speaking of redefining the good businessman, I've been to Sedona once and it felt very divine masculine to me.
Yeah.
It feels so masculine.
Yeah, exactly. It is the divine masculine. I've got some good men in my men's group here who really represent that. They're so strong. They're so powerful, and they hold space. I mean, that's what men do really well. If they're in their divine masculine, they hold space.
Well, I think after this conversation airs, there's going to be a flood of women heading to Sedona.
Good. So I'm here in Sedona. I've got a retreat coming up. I'm not sure when the podcast is coming up, but the retreat's coming up next April, the 14th, I believe, through the 16th. And it's an empowerment retreat, meditation and empowerment, which is to be empowered in our true divine nature. And I do my one-on-one sessions with people, meditation, and I also travel. I hold the satsang every Sunday here in my home in my retreat in Sedona, but I also travel to different places and provide satsang and teaching around self-realization around the world.
Beautiful. And what is your website?
It's just my name, Chess, and that's CHESS, just like the game, chessedwards.com.
Well, Chess, this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I'm sure we'll continue with this conversation because I believe that it's just talking about it where we're going to get to real solutions that create so much healing. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to speak to me and to our audience. It's been healing for me.
Me too. I so appreciate anyone who creates a forum for these types of conversations. So thank you for the courage and the passion.
You may support this program by becoming a member or a sponsor of the Conscious Business Chamber of Commerce by visiting consciousbusinesschamber.com. Please share, please like, and please subscribe.